Who of you has ever tried to balance an egg on its head? Have you tried it? Yeah. When I was a child, that question was the topic of one of my most favorite movie scenes. The movie was obviously about Christopher Columbus, and the story was that he returned home, he finally got some recognition for his discoveries, only then to find himself sitting amongst fellow adventurers who criticized him for it and said, everybody could have made your discoveries. Everybody could have gone to discover the Americas. As some of you might know, he obviously asked for some eggs, put them out in front of the people and said, please balance them on the top. Minutes passed, nobody managed, until he came back, took an egg, slammed it on the table, and there it was, standing there beautifully. Everybody else complained, said, we could have done that, to which he replied, of course you could have, if you had thought of it. I was so impressed by that when I was a kid. Today, I work with people who have amazing ideas. People like Connie from Cambodia, who invented a new brick that is cheap and can be assembled easily and that is there for allowing slum dwellers, people who've never had their own home, to actually buy and build their first real house. Or somebody like Samira from Egypt, Cairo, who was sick and tired of spending 4 hours every day in traffic and who realized that Western-style car-sharing companies wouldn't work in Egypt. And therefore, she developed an app, a car-sharing or carpooling app that would actually allow people who knew each other, who worked for the same company, who were studying at the same school, to carpool and go together. I love great ideas. And I love a good story. We all do. It's part of what makes us human. And yet my work over the last 10 years has convinced me that the power that we address to ideas is totally overstated. Ideas are actually not what brings about something new, something of value and innovation, or that creates a better place, a better world. So the reason why I came out, why I'm standing here in front of you today, is that I have a plea. The plea is the following. Please join me from now on in spending less time celebrating people for their amazing ideas, and spend more time celebrating them for their actions. Let me quickly tell you how I got to that conviction. How many of you knew from very early on what they wanted to do with their lives? Hands up. Great. Well, I was definitely not one of you. I had no clue. I had lots of ideas. First, I thought I wanted to be an athlete. Then I got really engaged in politics, wanted to live in different countries, lived in the US, in different countries in Europe and Asia, graduated from Oxford, and it felt like I was sorted. I had it all prepared. The reality was, I was not a single step closer to really figuring out which idea to follow and how to go about it. And the interesting thing for me at that time was, I was not alone. Now, whether you call it like Joe Ito of the MIT Media Lab, who talks about before internet and after internet, or whether you give it different names, doesn't really matter. All of us are facing tremendous change and are living in times of tremendous change. We're working with some of those members of an illustrious group of 75 million across the world that are young adults and that are unemployed. And some of them face real hardship, but others had all the support they needed. Great parents, a university degree, different options. And also all of you will know a company that was doing so well for decades until it got into real trouble because a disruptive technology came along, or there was a culture change or an attitude change towards their products. And if you need a figure, I think that's a really interesting one, that in the 1960s, the Fortune 500, the top Fortune 500 companies were on it for an average of 60 years. Today, they're on that index for an average of 15 years. So it doesn't matter where we come from, whether we're rich or poor, somehow this change is affecting us. And 10 years ago, when I started thinking about that, I became really curious about if there's all this change out there, how can we actually become empowered to deal with it positively and maybe even shape it productively? And so back then what I thought is that I'll just talk to those people that I thought would know the most about the world. So I looked up Nobel Peace Prize nominees, famous entrepreneurs, activists, artists, intellectuals. I wrote them and I met them, over 50 of them. And interestingly enough, it didn't matter whether they were left-wing activists from India or conservative entrepreneurs from the Silicon Valley. Almost all of them talked about two things. Number one they all talked about was knowledge. And that knowledge is not anymore power. The times when you learned something and you could use it for 45 years is over. All of us will continuously learn throughout our lives simply because knowledge is developing and changing so quickly. The second point they all talked about is skills, that we all need skills in order to be successful. But they didn't just talk about any kind of skills. They talked about what I call implementation skills, skills that take you from actually having an idea to making it happen. And so when I asked you earlier to join me in my plea to celebrate people for their actions and not so much for their ideas, I want to leave you today with 3 points that I believe are just as important as a good idea. So when I came out of these interviews, these conversations, we started running programs for talented young entrepreneurs and leaders from large organizations. We just wanted to see whether those 50 leaders were really had it right and it was all true, that knowledge didn't matter so much anymore and it was all about skills. Now, 10 years later, we have run those kinds of programs with people in over 60 countries, with hundreds of people, people that are poor, people that are rich, people that have a PhD from Harvard, people that never gone to university. And I think it's totally justified to say that all of them are united in coming to us by this one big question. In this quickly changing world, if we have a good idea, how do we actually make it happen? So 3 things that I think are just as important. The first one is which of your ideas to go for. And all of you know multiple techniques of thinking which one is really my best idea and which others I rather leave under the shower and don't take out with me into the world. But what we see in our work is that, as Dan Pink in his great TED Talk or the positive psychologists already stated, that it's really about following your passion and finding a purpose that's bigger than yourself. But why is that actually relevant? It's because we see that it gives people resilience. And just think of somebody that you know, somebody that sort of has gained some outside recognition, is sort of successful. When you sit next to that person and you listen to him or her tell their story, or you read about them in the newspaper, normally the story goes like, and then I discovered this, and from then on it went really well. Normally at that point in time, your head goes, wait a minute, that's not how I remember it. In my memory, things were much messier. There were ups and downs, things didn't go as well, things definitely didn't go as planned, and in the end, that person probably was successful with a very different idea than what he or she had started with. It's the resilience that keeps you on that track, and in our experience, resilience most often comes from when you do something that you're passionate for and that you think has a purpose. The second point that I believe is just as important as a great idea is figuring out how to actually plan it out. So when we have an idea that we're passionate about, we normally are very protective of it, right? So we accept criticism, but we don't really like it, let's be honest. So we surround ourselves with like-minded people. The people that we see that are successful in implementing their ideas are people who do just the opposite. they go out and talk to the people that think nothing like them, that don't really like even their ideas, and certainly have other cultures, other ideas, other topics that they're working on. If we're not living in these closed environments anymore, but if so many things are changing so quickly, we need to at least try to get as complete a picture as we can. And we believe the way to do it is by inviting diversity into your thinking. Invite people that think nothing like you to help you on your way. It's the second point that I think is just as important as a good idea when I look at our young entrepreneurs all around the globe. The third point is to actually get started. And there's so much talk about go out there, make it happen, just get going. And it's really true. Again and again, I see people who have amazing ideas and who basically continue to work on it, continue to work on it, continue to work on it, without ever actually going out and testing whether other people want it and also think it's great. But I believe more important than that is that once you get out there and you start acting, you start making mistakes. And mistakes are great for two reasons. First of all, they help you to get better, to iterate. But more importantly, they help you to put yourself into question and reflect on whether it's really that what you're doing that you want to do. So just as a last story, when we have groups of young entrepreneurs in the room, we regularly invite senior leaders in for a talk. And we always ask them, just share one message that's really important to you. Many, I would say the vast majority of those senior people share a failure, a big mistake, a crisis that they had in their lives. And that's not the kind of failure where you say sort of, oh, I messed up, but then the next day it all turned out to be fine. Those are sort of failures that make you reflect on your life. And listening to them, I cannot fail but notice that as I think that you start making mistakes, and these mistakes actually make you reflect on who you are and who you want to be. And that might have quite a big impact on what you're doing in the world. I think there's a narrative out there, and that narrative is that change is happening to us, that there are big problems, that there are big challenges that we're facing, and it's true. But in my work, I see every day normal people who find a passion, who think that it's valuable, and you just start acting. Just remember Columbus. We don't think of him today because he had this really amazing idea that the world could be round, but because he acted on it. And I think if we remember the Konyis from Cambodia, the Samiras from Egypt, and all these amazing other people who act on their ideas, and if we think on all the others that are not yet acting on them, if you think of people that you love, people that you think are talented, and if you think of those people not spending their life going from one, aha, this could be a great idea, to another, aha, this could be a great idea moment. But if those people that you think are talented would start acting on their idea, would know how to select the right one, would know how to plan it out, and who would get going, making mistakes, developing their life journey. Just think of the potential and the positive power that could have on the world. Thank you.